Back in college, I studied fiction writing, non-fiction writing, screenwriting, and I did my senior thesis on narrative in video games. Does that make me an expert in this topic? Well, no. Because I've never written a game professionally before, and I'm sure there are pitfalls to it that you or I would never think of, and navigating those pitfalls probably only comes with years of experience. That said, I do believe I have the ability to spot substandard writing when I see it, and it's not a hot take at this point to say that game writing is inconsistent at best and generally awful at worst. Now listen, before you type out the laundry list of games that do have good writing like Red Dead 2, or God of War, or Outer Wilds, or Disco Elysium, or any number of others. The point here is not that there are no games with good or even great writing. The point is for how much time and energy and care goes into high-level AAA releases, there are an unacceptable number of them that ship with Tumblr fanfiction levels of writing. So today I want to do a deep dive into two truly objectionable video game stories, learn a thing or two along the way, hopefully have a laugh, and then get into why I think this might be a trend across the industry. But before we get into our game-specific examples, I want to set some ground rules about what I mean when we're talking about game writing and game story, because it isn't as straightforward as you might think. When I did that senior thesis on game narrative, the biggest light bulb moment for me was that narrative isn't just what the game is telling you is happening through cutscenes and dialogue. There is the story the game is telling you is happening, and then there is the unique story of your playthrough and the choices you make throughout it. In the best titles, these two are interwoven, and a big part of striking the right balance comes from developers being self-aware about their game and their players. For example, Elden Ring is a gameplay-first, no hand-holding, go get killed by a lobster 30 times type of game. So, From Software created a story to match with minimal cutscenes and dialogue. This leaves space for the player to intuit the story through the world design and focus more on their personal journey through the game. It's just as much about you as it is about the Tarnished taking the throne. Elden Ring may not have a 400,000 word script like Hades 2 does, which also, Jesus Christ. But don't get it twisted. The game has good writing, mainly in the form of the world building done by George R.R. Martin, which had a palpable impact on the lands between. Even if the game isn't sitting you down for a 4-hour-long Vati-Vidya lore dump between every boss fight, there is a cohesive, tangible undercurrent binding everything together. Red Dead 2, by contrast, is a story-first, button prompts in the corner, let's sit by the fire and polish our revolver type of game. For that reason, it doesn't feel like a 5-minute long conversation with Hosea is taking you out of the action. It is the action, and it's made even better by the game's rich, interesting dialogue. Why am I telling you all this? Well, I think a lot of bad game writing comes from a fundamental misalignment of these two types of storytelling. The issue is less with the quality of the writing and more about the amount of it that the game forces on you. In my Doom video, I talked about how the best Doom story, in my opinion, is the one that gets out of my way as fast as possible. And I always appreciated how Doom Eternal's story was quick, snappy, and to the point. Doom the Dark Ages, conversely, featured many lengthy cutscenes in an effort to establish a more robust narrative. And for many, myself included, the increased emphasis on story was one of the many areas where the game downgraded itself. Especially considering the story they tried to tell was an extremely bland MacGuffin chase. When you improperly balance story and gameplay, you run the risk of disconnecting the player from the world they are in, turning that story into a barrier to their enjoyment rather than a complement to it. An overbearing story can be further worsened by bad scenes and bad dialogue, and the three often come as a package deal. This unholy mixture leads to stories like Monster Hunter Wilds. I have friends who actually like the story in Monster Hunter Wilds, and I know they're probably watching this right now, and guys, I have to say, You are simply incorrect on this one. Crazy thought. To me, Monster Hunter Wilds is at its best when you are monster hunting in the wilds. As long as I'm breaking monster ankles with sick longsword combos and watching damage number go up, I do not care about how we got here, or why we're fighting, or how the monster once hit his head on a coffee table as a kid and now has an irrational fear of mahogany. With this in mind, I don't see why Capcom needed to make the story a central component of the base game. For a campaign that takes roughly 25 hours to complete, there are 2.5 hours of cutscenes and 5.5 hours of dialogue in this thing, as in the runtime of Avatar twice. Even if the writing was great, I think I would still find it overstated by default, but luckily we don't have to worry about that because the writing is excruciating, both in terms of plot and dialogue. The essence of good writing is faithfully capturing human interaction and emotion. Even if the characters live in a world that is completely different from our own, we still need to be able to see ourselves in them in some way. The characters in Wilds, however, sound like people in the same way LaCroix is flavored. It's as if the script was written by an alien who heard about how humans talk from a friend who visited Earth for an hour once. No matter what is going on in the scene, everyone just sounds so out of place. And how's everything tasting over here?
This burger, it's delicious. I love the salty taste.
Oh, okay. Great. I'm glad.
Fuck. I know, no, it's not you. I just feel so crazy.
And, you know, as I was writing this script, I thought maybe I was misremembering it. So I actually went back and rewatched all 2.5 hours of cutscenes just to make sure. Look at my face. Look at what this story did to my face. That is the face of a defeated man. As it turns out, I did not misremember. Scene by scene, it is brutal. Who could forget the legendary moment where the villagers in Kanafa don't know what weapons are and don't understand weapons as a concept?
Who's that? What's that on her back? It's huge! Hey!
I guess they really haven't seen a weapon before.
This really has no bearing on the overall plot, but goddammit, it is so silly, and they bring it up like 6 different times. You're telling me you guys live in a world where gigantic, evil monsters present an ever-present threat to your existence, and you never thought of sharpening a stick to deal with that? Even their headdresses have horns on them, you know, the weapons of the animal kingdom. I mean, do they know what horns are used for? Even if you don't use weapons for hunting, it's hard to imagine you'd have gotten this far as a civilization without using sharp tools for everyday things like cutting cheesy bread. Oh wait, you do use tools for those things because Grandma is using a fucking knife in the mukbang scene. Again, this really has no effect on the overall story, but it's so stupid, I just couldn't help but talk about it. This game is just a masterclass in bad writing. You ever heard the concept of show, don't tell? As in, good writing should illustrate a concept without words if it can. Like how this shot in God of War Ragnarok conveys that Thor is powerful by putting the camera over his shoulder looking down at Kratos. Or how this moment shows that Odin thinks he's superior to everyone in the room because he drinks from their cups without asking. Well, Capcom's writers must have gotten it backwards, because every time there's missing information, a character will just park themselves in the middle of your screen, deliver a flood of expository dialogue, and then leave.
The people of Liberia created the Dragon Torch, a source of limitless energy. They channeled this energy along the wormways, wielding its power in every corner of the land. At times, it was lightning to dispel monsters, or a heavy downpour to cleanse poisons discarded upon the land. It was fire to forge precious materials, and it negated the very weight of buildings so they could mount the sky. Nature's laws were no more than a suggestion to them.
Or an event that is crucial to the plot will happen to unfold at the perfect moment so the story can progress. Allow me to show you a particularly bad section of it without telling you about it. I mean, I'll still be telling you about it, but you get the point. You see what I'm going for. Quick context, the plot revolves around this kid named Nata, who is not a good character. In the opening scene of the game, Nata is separated from his tribe by a scary monster named Arkveld, and then it's up to you and your crew to reunite him with his family, which takes about half the campaign. Despite the fact that Nata's family does not relocate after the Arkveld attack, he has no useful information about where to go, the place he grew up, or even the people who live there. So you go village to village asking about Nata's tribe with pretty much no luck, until you happen to find an underground cave system that leads right to his home. Nata is then reunited with his uncle, who decides to regale him with the entire history of their people in that exact moment in a way that happens to answer all of your group's most burning questions. Why did Nata go his whole life without knowing the basic history of his own family? Who knows? The important part is Nata finds out his people created Arkveld, which causes him to throw a temper tantrum, because if there's anything that upsets a 12-year-old boy, it's the ethical implications of playing God. Uncle Tashin then explains that Arkveld doesn't need to eat to survive and can subsist on wyvern milk. But then, in that very moment, Arkveld shows up and eats a few creatures, which goes against information that we've accepted as fact for a whole 25 seconds. The story actually does this a few times, where it will set something up and then pay it off in under a minute. Another example of this is the scene in Azuz with the Fire Spring Festival, where the people use a flame to channel into a forge that pours into a mold that they hit to make rocks. At first there's no flame, and then the flame is too strong, so they need to find somewhere to channel it, or things could just get so bad, things would be terrible. This seems like a real conundrum until a perfect solution is discovered within about 5 seconds, setting up and paying off conflict at truly astonishing speeds.
Can we quell the fire or reroute it?
Yes, the old forge. It uses a different system.
Again, show don't tell and setup and payoff are the two most fundamental writing tips taught on the first day of any screenwriting or fiction class, and this game takes both of them behind the barn and shoots them in the head with Chekhov's gun. Chekhov's gun, if you're unfamiliar, is another writing principle coined by the Russian playwright Chekhov. The principle basically says that every element in a story should have a purpose, so if you take the time to say there's a gun mounted above the fireplace, that gun should come into play at some point in the story. Wilds actually sets up a perfect Chekhov's gun moment and then completely ruins it. Towards the end of the game, we find out that a monster has hijacked the magical bullshit energy source that keeps the whole world going, but the hunter can't fight it because it's encased in a big crystal. But Nata's pendant, which was the last thing given to him by his father before his death, has the ability to melt the crystal, free the monster, and save the world. That's not a bad setup at all, actually. Nata has to destroy the pendant, symbolically overcoming his past and ensuring the world has a future. But instead of all that, this happens.
We don't have to do this. There's one other option.
So what the fuck was the point of any of that? They act like the hunter fighting Xochitl is this like Jimmy Neutron galaxy brain level strategy, when that is the approach they have taken for literally every creature they have come across. And what's even crazier is how easy it is to fix this plot point. Just make it so that Nata still has to use the pendant to free the monster, and then the hunter gets to fight them afterward. Everyone wins. Nata gets his character moment, and then the hunter gets their power fantasy. But instead they were like, no, we don't want a character to have to do something challenging to overcome an obstacle. That would be, that would just be yucky. That would be gross. But my real favorite moment is when the commander character receives a letter during the credits, which he reads aloud, recapping the entire plot beat for beat.
Unfortunately, after learning predation, it became unable to control its intake of wyvern milk. Intoxicated by the surplus of energy, it descended into madness. These were the findings of the expedition?
Yes, sir. But This report has just come in.
Wyveria's ultimate guardian, Zoshia, awoke from its resting place.
I can't do this.
It's as if they expected players to skip all the cutscenes, or they had so little faith in their own storytelling that they thought a SparkNotes cram session was needed for people to put it all together. The one olive branch I will extend to this story is that the scenes where the new monsters are introduced are almost always cool. In fact, a good rule of thumb for this thing is if there's a monster on screen, it's probably going to be a decent cutscene. Coincidentally, those scenes also feature pretty much no dialogue. Look, the obvious counterpoint here is that nobody plays Monster Hunter for the story. But that's precisely my point. Games are in a unique position as a medium because they can just back off on story when it doesn't suit the overall experience. So why does Capcom feel the need to shove so much of it down our throats, especially when it's so poorly written? And just in case you think this is some thinly veiled anti-Japan bias, let's talk about a Western title that suffers from the same issues: Dragon Age: The Veilguard. I thought about ripping into Borderlands 3 here, but I already did that in my standalone Borderlands video, so if you're interested in that, feel free to check it out after this video wraps up. Unlike Monster Hunter, which awkwardly grafted a bad story onto a gameplay-focused experience, Dragon Age belongs to a series and genre where high-quality writing is an expectation, so simply having less story wasn't really an option. But I have to stop here, because I haven't actually played Veilguard, which means it was time to buckle up for another 5 hours of cutscenes. Why do I do this to myself?
One eternity later.
First and foremost, Veilguard suffers from major tone issues. The characters sound way too modern, and it was immediately immersion breaking to hear medieval fantasy characters talk like people from the present day.
But the crystal's broken until I fix it. It's kind of my thing, fixing magical stuff.
But by far the bigger issue is how positive everyone is. Despite the fact that incredibly high-stakes events are playing out that could turn the world into an unrecognizable body horror hellscape, every character is so warm and fuzzy throughout this whole thing. It's the writing equivalent of an uncomfortably long hug. Every scene feels like a group therapy session where everyone is supportive and emotionally available at all times. And how's everything tasting? Well, my chicken is raw, but that's okay. I don't blame you or the chef. Working in a restaurant is really hard, and we're all just doing our best. Oh my god, I am so sorry. Do you want me to get you a new one? No, I'll just eat it like this. But next time, I'm sure you'll do great, because that's who you are. You're amazing. Never thought I'd miss the Monster Hunter guys. If you want to play a fun game, take a shot every time a character says, "You've got this," or "We've got this," and then try not to die of alcohol poisoning. Even the bad guys, who are actively working against you, randomly take the time to compliment the player character.
You did as well as anyone could have.
When the game first came out, I saw a lot of commentary online about how the game sounded like it was written with HR in the room, and now that I've seen it for myself, there's really no better way to put it. There is not a single difficult personality in the core cast of characters, and everyone works together in beautiful, boring harmony throughout the entire story. I have seen friend groups get more heated about choosing a dinner spot than these guys do about saving the entire world. There isn't even a minor disagreement about strategy, and when uncomfortable topics do arise, the writing backpedals away from them as fast as possible. There are so many examples of this, but one that stood out to me is when two cities fall under siege from the bad guys at the same time, and the player has to choose which one to save, thereby dooming the other one. The two cities also are the hometowns of two of your party members, so it puts the player in a tough spot and should create real tension with whoever city you choose not to save. But in the playthrough I watched, the guy who watches his hometown get annihilated is mildly upset about your decision for about a minute before everything goes back to being jolly and swell. An even better example comes when one of your compatriots questions your alliance with Solus. Solus is the morally ambiguous wizard who sets the events of the game in motion, and he's also known as the god of lying, deception, and cunning. Yet your character repeatedly takes advice from Solus and accepts everything he says at face value without question. When your friend rightfully asks why you trust him, here is the response.
You really trust him? Trust is such a strong word, you know? So you don't trust him? All right then.
This odd commitment to good vibes leads to writing that feels very conflict-averse, which is a bad thing for writing to be, considering conflict is the fuel that drives stories forward. Nobody watches reality TV shows for the part where everyone's getting along and having a great time. Even when the bad guys are winning in Veilguard, there's always this feeling that everything will just work itself out, and most of the time, it does. During one of the big battle scenes, there's a dragon flying around that the protagonists can't kill unless it lands in a very specific spot where they have a dragon trap set up. So of course, the very first time it lands, it goes exactly where they need it to and it dies. No bait, no strategy, just pure convenience. They also pull the Rise of Skywalker maneuver like 5 different times, where it seems like a character is dead, but then a few scenes later, or even a few shots later, they turn out to be fine, and somehow that's supposed to be a twist. That one really gets me because it's such a cheap, non-committal plot device. The writers want the emotional punch of a character death, but are too lazy to deal with the long-term ramifications of that writing choice. I will say, Veilguard does a better job than Monster Hunter from a technique perspective. There are some decent setups and payoffs in this, and a textbook Chekhov's gun example. Unfortunately, the execution of these plot points leaves a lot to be desired. The big twist at the end of Act 2 is that Varric, your mentor character, who is severely wounded in the opening scene of the game, has actually been dead all along, and Solus has been making you hallucinate conversations with him so he can trap you in his dimension. I know, who would have thought that the god of deception would deceive you? In fairness, as it happened, it actually felt pretty interesting and unexpected, but the more I thought about it, the more I realized it really serves no purpose for the story. There's a decently common trope in media where a mentor character will die sooner than expected, leaving their pupil to step up with no safety net. It can actually work pretty well when done properly, like in the case of Master Oogway's death or Yoda's. But here, it doesn't really feel like Rook is stepping up because he's been leading the team the whole time, and because of the aforementioned good vibes, it doesn't really feel like there's a risk of things going wrong in Varric's absence. In fact, all fake Varric has been doing the entire time is reassuring Rook that he's got this, and he's the right guy for the job, and he even stops by from the afterlife to do it one more time before departing for good. By far the worst plot point comes in the final scene where you defeat Solus. Solus needs his magical dagger to complete his evil ritual, so off-screen your team fabricates a non-magical decoy dagger, which you then give to him, and he accepts it, and it works perfectly. So you're telling me that the god of deception fell for the old bait and switcheroo? That would be like Magnus Carlsen falling for the scholar's checkmate. Again, it wouldn't be a big deal if this was any other villain, but you've told us repeatedly about Solus's unmatched intellect and how he's always one step ahead. So it feels a little too convenient that he would easily be fooled by your first attempt at tricking him. You know, there's a saying in writing that characters can only be as smart as the people who write them, which is how Tyrion Lannister went from a brilliant political tactician to...
He's bringing all the dead people back to life, and they put the women and children in a crypt with all the dead people. So, rah. Tyrion is smart, but I guess not that smart.
I still haven't recovered from season 8. I know there's like a million video essays out there on it already, and I'd be like 7 years too late, but sometimes I just want to upload one anyway, just for like the catharsis of it, you know? Anyway, I think this hurts Veilguard in a few places. The writing leans pretty heavily into the battle of wits between the good guys and the bad guys, yet a lot of scenes unfold in a very simplistic way. For instance, we hear about how opportunities to hurt the gods will be extremely rare and difficult to capitalize on, yet Rook manages to wound one of them by shooting her with a ballista when she's not looking. Later on, the team manages to kill her for good by stabbing her when she's not looking. Another example of this is when the crew puts on disguises to infiltrate an enemy base, but nobody covers their faces. Like, not even a little bit. Not a hat, not a mask, nothing. They just go in completely exposed from the neck up. Look, I get I might be coming off like a jerk right about now, but the writers had years where they thought about these characters every day and made good money while doing it, so I don't think we're wrong to expect more. When writing is so clearly flimsy, it invites us to ask questions about the world that damage our immersion. Like, why aren't there more dragon traps in a world full of dragons? Why don't the good guys bring ballistas to every fight with the gods? Why don't the bad guys recognize the faces of their #1 ops? Honestly, there's more I could say about this game's writing, like how cliche it is. I mean, we get an unironic over my dead body, for fuck's sake.
Over my dead body.
No, come on. But I gotta find somewhere to cut myself off, and this feels like the right point. Overall, Veilguard's writing feels painfully sanitized. It's so concerned with sanding off its rough edges and minimizing uncomfortable moments between characters when those are the very things that make a story interesting. Obviously, there's loads of other games we could talk about, like Black Ops 7 or Borderlands 4 if what I've heard is true, or Tales from the Borderlands, or even, God forbid, Forspoken. But between Wilds and Veilguard, I think we've covered a lot of the common problems that hold game writing back. Wilds improperly balances story and gameplay to begin with, and the story we do get lacks the foundational techniques that enrich writing, like relatable characters, setup and payoff, and showing instead of telling. Veilguard's story more closely matches the expectations for its genre, but it struggles immensely with tone and with delivering satisfying logical plot points.
Because we don't give up. Knock us down, and we come back swinging. Nice speech, Rook.
But it's hard to complete a contract if you don't know where the target.
I think there are a few key reasons as to why game writing consistently falls short of the standards set by every other story-driven medium. First, I don't think writing is treated as a priority by a large portion of the industry, despite the fact that bad writing can quickly sour an otherwise decent game. Most of the time, writers are expected to bend their stories around technical and design limitations rather than the other way around. Writing also isn't prioritized from a staffing perspective. A 200-person development team might have 60 artists, 50 programmers, 40 designers, and 1 or 2 writers. Those 2 writers won't even spend all of their time writing. They're usually hired on as narrative designers, which is a role that comes with a lot of tedious side responsibilities, like implementing voice lines in Engine, writing internal team documentation, and writing non-story text for menus. These extra tasks take writers' attention away from the core narrative, and they seem like the perfect thing for junior members of the writing team to handle, but as far as I can tell, those roles simply don't exist. This is another huge issue with the way writing is handled in the games industry. Art, design, and programming all have built-in career ladders that take talented devs from junior to senior and beyond. Writing has no such thing. You're either someone who already writes games or no one. Because there are no junior or associate level writing roles, the industry ends up missing out on a lot of talent. Just take a look at Jennifer Svedberg Yen, who wrote what is already considered one of the greatest gaming stories of all time with Expedition 33. She joined their team as a temp voice actress and ended up landing the writing role by impressing the game director with her story ideas. In a AAA setting, something like that could never happen, and she would be immediately written off, pun intended, because of her lack of prior experience. Obviously, this is a lot of speculation speculation on my part, and again, the point is not that there are no games with good writing. The ceiling is clearly super high, but the floor is also unacceptably low, and that's the point. I hope this video helped explain why game writing feels the way it does from a technique perspective, and if you enjoyed, as always, likes and subs are greatly appreciated. Thanks for sticking with me this far into the video. Hope you have a great rest of your day or night, and I'll catch you next time.
You see how weird it is, though?
No.
That's what they do in the game. This is good, though.